for this meeting, and if there's any people that you know that have not managed to log on, or they've, because of the confusion with the link, they haven't been able to access it, we will be able to send out a copy of the presentation afterwards as well. So just to let you know, you are recording. I am also going to mute everybody just for ease of use, but we have got Diane, who's one of our careers advisors, who will be looking at the chat. So if you want to pop any questions in there, she may be able to respond back to you, but we will have a look at them at the end of the presentation as well. And I'm happy to take any questions at that time. So I'll make a start. I'm conscious that people will still be joining in, but I think we just need to get going after this short delay. So apologies for that. So what does our college offer in terms of progression? Well, this is one of the things, really, us as a college, and certainly myself as a senior manager. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. I'm Olivia Witchdale, one of the vice principals. One of the things that we're really proud about at Prior Purse Glove is our students' progression routes after they leave the college. So we have some of the highest success rates in the region when it comes to progression routes. 88% of our students will progress on to HE or employment, which is above the national average, which you can find on the government website. I've put a link at the bottom. We also have a higher number of students staying in their destinations as well the year after they leave, which again is really good for us. Our percentage for Russell Group universities again is above the national average, and when we look at something called HEI data, our students fare really well in terms of their performance at university. It's a little bit more difficult for us to collect data about apprenticeships and employment because obviously, as you can imagine, students go far and wide, but that's something we're actually looking at doing as a college moving forwards to try and get a better picture of what happens to our students 1, 2, 3, 4 years after they've left us, so that we can obviously share that with students, our current students as well. So where are the students at the minute? So they're coming towards the end of their first year of their studies, the level 3 students. Those who are mainly studying an A-level programme, they are on what's called a linear A-level, which means there are no external exams at the end of the first year. So at the end of this year, after half term, they will do some internal assessment. So we will have a CAG, what we call CAG week, key assessment grade week, and we try and replicate sort of the exam conditions for them during that week. And this allows us to measure their performance at this point in the year, so that we can actually then have some information which will allow us to then go on to make, for example, UCAS predictions if they decide to apply to university. Students who are studying what we call applied general qualifications, which are qualifications such as criminology, the BTEC courses, so things, for example, like performing arts and applied science, and also the Cambridge technical courses, for example, health and social care and ICT. They may well have had an exam this year already, an external exam, and they will actually receive a qualification at the end of this academic year, which will usually be what's called a certificate, which is worth half the number of UCAS points of the 2-year course. They will then progress on to the second year of the course, just as they would with the A-levels, but the second year will give them the second qualification, which generally speaking is the extended certificate, or if they're doing health and social care, it will be the diploma, because that's worth 2 A-levels. So we expect the vast majority of our first year students studying level 3 programmes to stay with us on the second year of their programme, because obviously if they're doing A-levels, they're not going to leave with any qualifications at this time. And what we will be doing is focusing in much more detail on the progression routes over the next few weeks through our Pathways programme, which is our tutorial programme, to make sure that all of our students have a secure destination by the time they leave college. And the reason for that is obviously we want them to have something to go on to, but the government will also measure us on that as well. So we have to make sure we do our best to find a destination for all of our students. So what has happened so far? So since they've joined the college in September, there have been sort of little steady drips of talks about progression. We will have offered some particular career pathways talks, for example, medicine and dentistry, because that requires an early UCAS application. We will have allowed them access to talks by HE providers as well, and employers too, to try and get them thinking about what their next steps might be. In the pathway sessions next week, however, we will be doing our progression launch, and students will be working on packages which can be accessed via Microsoft Forms, which they're now familiar with because we've used them in the pathway programme so far. They'll also have the opportunity to register for UCAS, which we'll say a little bit more about in a moment. And we do recommend, unless they're absolutely certain that they're not going to university, we would recommend that students do sign up for this in the first instance, because it will allow them to collate information such as qualifications, skills and aptitudes, etc., in one place, so that when they are applying for other things in addition to university, they've got all of that information to hand. Our progression fair will take place on the 10th of July, which is also on the same day as our Year 11 preview day. And on that day, they will have access to a number of providers, which I'll mention more about in a moment. Throughout the course of this first year as well, our students have had the opportunity to sign up for a wide range of university support schemes, some of the most popular ones being Realising Opportunities, which covers a range of universities such as York and Leeds in this region, and also to sign up for summer schools as well, so things like the Sutton Trust summer schools or Oxford's unique summer schools amongst some of the ones that the students would apply for. A lot of these schemes are really important for our students, particularly if there isn't any history within your family of somebody going to university before. It allows them to experience university life, but it can also mean that if they're eligible, it might actually result in a lower grade offer for them when it comes to next year when they apply for the courses. So what will they be doing next week? So in college, the students access careers information via Microsoft Teams. So at the minute they're on the Year 12 careers team, and this is where they can find a wealth of information about all of the different progression routes that they can be thinking about. And they don't have to just focus on one. They can keep all of their options open at this stage. Diane and Claire and Lauren and Beth regularly put updates into the careers team, so you can see this is just sort of a little snapshot of the Year 13 careers team, but there are also channels within the team that are linked to specific progression routes where students can find more information. When they get into the pathway sessions next week, they will actually select a pathway they wish to follow, and they will complete a series of tasks through that pathway, which will allow them to find out more about their chosen pathway and how they will go about sort of doing the next steps, so setting up application forms, coming up with a CV, writing a covering letter, etc. And it all forms part of our Prior Plus programme as well, where we encourage the students to work towards progression routes, but also good attendance, academic achievement, engaging in enrichment activities and volunteering as well. So the progression fair, as I mentioned before, that's on Wednesday the 10th of July, and that will sit in the middle of the college day, so students will be allowed to go and access that. They'll do some preparation activities through the Pathways programme so that they're well prepared to go along to that progression fair, because what we really want to encourage them to do is to ask questions of the providers that are there. We have universities, we have FE colleges, we have apprenticeship providers, armed forces, and sometimes other employers there as well. And it is a really well attended event, both by the providers and the students themselves. Obviously, we encourage them to go along. There might be some free pens on offer. Prospectuses are usually given out. And yeah, thank you, Diane. The students can scan QR codes with a chance of winning prizes as well. So it's really important that they attend that event, because it will obviously help them in making some decisions about what they want to do next year. I think the other thing that's worth mentioning at this point in time as well is that we are moving into university open day season as well. So again, if you talk to your student about, particularly if they're looking at applying to university, they need to be looking on those university websites where they're interested in, so that they can book onto those open days as well. So what help's available to the students in college? Their pathway leader will be the first port of call, and they will have actually had one-to-one meetings with your student throughout this academic year so far, and they will have talked to them about progression. The faculty managers and deputy faculty managers are able to give advice on careers as well, in a general sense, but our experts really are our careers team. So Diane, Claire and Beth, who are in college throughout the week, we've got full coverage throughout the week, although they are part-time working members of staff. You should be able to access somebody on every day. And the students are well aware about how to go about accessing this support as well. The team's information is really important. So again, the students need to make sure that they check regularly on the careers team and on the Prior Plus team to be able to access the resources that the careers team have put together. But they can also go and talk to the careers team about other resources that might be available. So for example, the Higher Ideas website, which is really good if you're looking at going to university. So what are the options that we're looking at? Well, looking at our own destinations data, you can see that nearly 2/3 of our students do progress onto university. We obviously will get a slightly higher number than that applying, but as the year progresses in year 13, some students will make different decisions about which progression route they want to follow. So it might be that they will apply for apprenticeships as well, or they decide to take up employment. We have seen a slight decline in the number of students applying to university, and I think that's just because they are more aware of the other options that are available now. But we would still encourage students as much as possible, if they're considering it, to make that application so that they're in that process from the start, rather than leaving it to a later point in time in the year when then their choices can be a little bit more limited. So let's have a look at you applying to university first of all. Some of you may have done this recently. You might have applied to university yourselves. I certainly did back in the day when I was at college, but I'm old enough to now say that when I did my UCAS application, it was on a piece of paper rather than online. So it's nice to see we've moved with the times. UCAS stands for the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. It is a charity that essentially acts as a clearinghouse for all of the universities in the UK. So the vast majority of courses that are offered by the UK universities will be offered through UCAS. The only ones that sometimes may differ are things like stage schools, for example, or some of the universities that are private. There are one or two of those in the UK. So your student needs to do that research carefully to find out whether or not they're going to have to apply through UCAS. There are UCAS different routes through UCAS as well. So if you are looking at applying for performing arts in terms of music or drama related courses, then the students need to check whether or not they would need to apply through the conservatoire route. But again, if they do those subjects at A level, they'll be able to talk to Helen, who teaches music, or Jacob, who teaches performing arts, and they will best advise them on which routes might be the most appropriate for them. So when we apply through UCAS, our students will get 5 choices. That is all. You can't put a list of 20 in. You are only allowed 5 choices. And this is 5 course choices. The 5 courses could technically all be at one university, or they could be at 5 different universities. They could be 5 completely different courses, but that makes things very, very difficult, and it's highly unlikely that students will be successful if they do something like that. So what we say to students is your choices should be realistic and coherent. Coherent means that they are looking at a similar subject area. So for example, if you were looking at engineering, you might only have 1 or 2 different engineering options on there. So it might be that you have mechanical and aerospace engineering, for example. It might be you look at civil engineering and structural engineering. You wouldn't normally apply for civil engineering and mechanical engineering on the same UCAS form because they are quite different courses. When we talk about the choices being realistic, students need to look at the grades that they're currently achieving and potentially what they could achieve. In an ideal world, I would love every student to be able to go to the university of their dreams. And for a lot of students, that could be Oxford, Cambridge, or it could be a Russell Group university. But in reality, not every student is going to be in a position where they can do that. So they need to look at the grades quite carefully that they're getting and then pitch their choices at just above, around what they're achieving, and then maybe having some kind of safety net choice as the fifth choice. So for example, if we had a student that was currently achieving 3 Bs in their courses, I don't think it's unreasonable to maybe look at some courses that might be ABB or even AAB as their sort of aspirational choices. Then maybe having 1 or 2 in there that might be around the 3B mark, and then possibly having one that looks like it's maybe BCC or BBC, so that they've got a little bit of variety. If you put all courses in that all have the same grades and you don't achieve those grades, then you put yourself into a bit of a pickle and you have to look at alternative options, but further down the line where there isn't so much choice available. So please have those discussions with your students. Our teachers will have those discussions with the students as well. Sometimes the students decide not to follow our advice despite our best efforts. But as I said, it can then lead to a situation where they end up with 5 rejections, and we really don't want anybody to be in that position at all. We want to make sure that students are getting at least 1 or 2 offers. There are also some very competitive courses. So again, referring back to Oxford and Cambridge, but also looking at medicine, dentistry and veterinary science, where it is highly possible that they will get 1 or more rejection. But with those courses, as long as you get 1 offer, then you've done well, because it's a very competitive process. We also want the students to think very carefully about where they're applying to. If you have no intention of driving down to Exeter to drop your student off and pick them up at the end of term, or they get incredibly homesick, then don't put Exeter down as a choice. Think about universities on the doorstep. If they want to live at home, then we would always say to students, the commutable universities, Durham, Newcastle, Northumbria, Teesside, York, St John and York are all doable on a weekly basis. We've had students do that in the past. Anything that's a bit further afield, then you might need to think carefully about whether or not they want to live away from home. So, issues to consider. So there's a whole world of things to explore when you're looking at different university courses, and these are some of the things that students need to consider. Some universities will not offer all courses. So for example, if you have a student who wants to do nursing, there's no point in them applying to Durham University, because Durham University don't offer nursing. Equally, if you want to do something like Anglo-Saxon studies, there will only be a few universities that will offer that in the country. So there's no point setting your heart on a university until you've figured out which course you want to do. Once you've figured out the course, then you start looking at which universities offer it, and you start digging into the course details a bit more. Because again, if you look at a course at one university, it won't necessarily be identical at another university. So if we look at English literature, what you would study at English literature at a Russell Group university may be very different from what you might study at one of the newer universities. So for example, I know that the English literature degree at Teesside covers some quite modern genres, whereas if you look at an English degree at somewhere like Durham or Oxford and Cambridge, they will sometimes dip into even medieval literature. So the student needs to be clear about what's going to be taught on the course and that it's the right thing for them. You can look at teaching style. There's a lot of information on the Discover Uni website, which is a government website where you can dig in a little bit to student opinion about different courses, which can be quite useful. There's the consideration of a foundation year. So if they're not going to get the grades to get onto the direct entry 3-year course, they can spend an extra year at university, but that obviously has a big additional cost attached. So it may be better to explore things like access courses, which I'll mention a little bit later on. There's also obviously a wide variety of undergraduate degree courses, whether you do an integrated master's, whether you pick a course that has a year in industry, like a sandwich year, or a year abroad. Considering where the university is based, so do you want to be in a big city where there's multiple universities, or would you prefer to be somewhere smaller, or would you prefer to be in a campus university like Keele or Lancaster, where you're not in the centre of a town? Obviously, I think status and reputation can be quite important to students. Obviously, there's a lot of fuss made about Russell Group universities, but they aren't always the best for every course, so the students need to do their research carefully. And the employment prospects, as I said, you can look on discoveruni.gov.uk. But they also need to check any other additional requirements as well. So do they need any level of work experience to apply for the course? Is there an admissions test that they need to sit in addition to doing their A-levels to be considered for that course as well? Diane's popping loads of useful stuff in the chat, so please do have a look there. So how do you figure out what grades you're going to get or what points you're going to need? Well, if you go onto the UCAS website, there is what's called a tariff points calculator. So back in the day when I went to university, they would just make you an offer based on the grades. Nowadays, there are universities that will still do that. Again, the more traditional universities, Russell Group, etc. But there are other universities that have a more flexible approach where they will use point scores. So points are allocated to each grade at A level and on the applied generals as well. I'll show you that in a second. So your student can start having a go at working out what their points total might be, and that will then allow them to filter searches on UCAS to look at which courses might be within reach for them. So that's the A-level one. They're the ones for the BTECs as well, so you can see those on the screen. And there's also one for EPQ. Some of your students might be doing EPQ, which is extended project qualification, which is worth, as you can see, roughly half the amount of points of an A level. And that's something that's a really good qualification to do to develop research skills, extended writing, being able to do a presentation as well. I think it's a little bit late in the year. If they haven't already shown interest in that, it might be difficult for them to pick that up now. But if they are interested, if they speak to their pathway leader, they'll be able to point them in the right direction with regards to the staff involved in that. And that's just showing you what the calculator looks like. So you can see here on this one, we've put in biology at a B, sociology at an A, and then BTEC law as a distinction star. It gives you the individual points total, and then it shows you the total at the bottom as well. So students should be getting familiar with that and sort of trying to roughly see how many points they're expecting to get. So important thing for you guys to note is the deadlines. So these are absolutely hard deadlines that are set by UCAS in the brackets first of all. The ones in bold are the ones that we set as a college because of the volume of applications we deal with. There is no way that if students press send on the 15th of October on the deadline day for Oxbridge Medicine, Dentistry or Vet, that we can process all those applications. So we have to set our deadlines in advance of that. So for the first UCAS deadline, it is the 23rd of September this year. And that's to make sure that we've got enough time to check the forms, prepare the reference, get any students to make any amendments that we need, check the personal statement before we give it the final quality check to send it off to UCAS. So the students need to adhere to our deadline that we set, otherwise it can compromise the quality of our checking processes. And as Diane said there, we can have in excess of 50 applicants for that date. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot of forms to process. Then we would recommend that anybody who's applying for other competitive courses, so things like NHS courses, things like midwifery, nursing, radiography, physiotherapy, teaching degrees, social work, looking at Russell Group courses, we would say the earlier they can get those applications in, the better their chances are of getting interviews and offers sooner rather than later. But the final UCAS deadline is the 29th of January 2025, obviously, but we would like to see students getting that UCAS application in before Christmas. The reason we say that is because after Christmas, anybody doing applied general qualifications may well have an external exam, and we will also have our first set of proper mocks before the end of January as well. So we don't want them to be saying, oh, I can't concentrate on my mocks because I've got to get my UCAS form done. They need to get that done before Christmas, and then they can concentrate on the exams. As we said before, it's 5 choices. UCAS do charge an administration fee of £28.50 when you submit the UCAS form. Any students who are free school meals or in receipt of our means tested bursary, we will pay that for them, but I'm afraid everybody else does have to pay that fee to submit the application. So after the application has gone through, you have to be quite patient, particularly those people who applied for the earliest deadline. You would think that they would hear back first, but no, they don't. It takes quite some time to organise interviews, for the interviews to take place, and then for the admissions tutors to make decisions about who they're going to make offers to. So those students, although they get the applications in early, they will be some of the students that will have to wait the longest to hear back. If students are just applying for a standard undergraduate degree, for example, in English, history, psychology, etc., the chances are they can hear back quite quickly. It can be as quick as a couple of days, or it might take a couple of weeks. Again, there's not one hard and fast rule. Some universities are quick, others, for example, Durham, Edinburgh, Northumbria, can sometimes take quite a long time as well. Just because of the way they run their admissions processes. But there is a cut-off time in May that all universities have to make decisions by, and after that time, the students will then be given a second deadline by which they have to then accept the offers. In the first instance, when the offers are made to students, the offers will be described as a conditional offer. So what that means is the university will say, you need to get these grades. So it might just be you need to get 3 Bs, or it might be something like you need to get an A in chemistry, an A in maths, and then a B in a third subject. Again, different universities, different entry requirements. I've even seen 2 students, same course, same university, same predicted grades, same GCSE results, get different offers. So I can't tell you what a typical offer is for a typical course at a typical university. There isn't such a thing. So you just need to be aware that that is very specific. They will make decisions based on GCSE grades, predicted grades from the college, the reference written by the college, and also the personal statement that the students write as well. So it's just being aware that the universities will have a lot of information. And as we've said there, that deadline by which they have to respond is key. If they don't respond by that deadline, UCAS will automatically take those offers away from them. If any student is in the position where they don't have an offer at all, then they become automatically eligible for a system called UCAS Extra. And that's where they can then continue to apply for one course at a time until they get a place that they're happy with and that they want to go to. So moving on to results day, which obviously seems like a long time away because we haven't had this year's results day yet, but you'll be surprised at how quickly it flies. If they achieve the offer, then that's it. They'll be going to university. The universities will normally update UCAS track on the morning of A-level results because they receive the A-level results at the same time we do. If they fall below the offer, they may still be accepted, and if track's updated and said yes, then they don't need to worry. If track hasn't updated, so if they haven't been accepted or rejected, then they may need to put a phone call into the university to find out what's happening. So it's important that students have access to that on results day. And if they don't get their offer, so if they've not met the offer and they've been rejected, they may well have an insurance choice that they will get into, but if they don't get into that, then they will become eligible for clearing. And what UCAS will then do is they will start to send through courses where there are places available, and it's now got to the point where they will actually send them automatic offers, but students don't have to accept that. They can still shop around and see what's best for them. If students do better than their expected in their A-levels than they expected, and they want to have a look around, that is possible, but I think it's becoming increasingly unlikely that they would find an additional place at a university, but there's nothing to stop them from doing that and having a look around. So if there was a university that they'd wanted to go to that they've now got the grades for, they can still ring them up on results day and find out if they've got any places, but they would then have to get released from the other choices that they'd been made as well, the offers that they'd been made as well. So final slide about university, is it worth it? Obviously, as parents, the thing that worries us most is the cost. I've got a 16-year-old. I'm going to be in your position in a year's time, and you look at the cost of university, and it does seem a lot of money. The way in which the students pay it back, however, is classed as a graduate tax. So they will only be paying a certain amount back dependent on the amount that they earn. So it will be an affordable amount that they pay back. The student loans do not have any impact on your credit score either. So if they're worrying about getting a loan for a car or mortgage for a house, student debt does not impact on that unless you've had massive problems paying it back when you were supposed to. And obviously what we want to stress to students is that potentially having a degree can give you greater earning power in the future as well. It can obviously give you more opportunities to take up higher positions within companies. It can, open you to a wider range of careers as well. So, I think there's still a strong case for going to university, but I think students need to be clear that it is the right thing for them to do, and they can see where that's going to take them in terms of a career, because it is obviously a big investment in their future. And that's why we do see more students obviously choosing to live at home now as well, because they don't want the cost of staying in university accommodation necessarily. So if they're not sure about university, or if they haven't quite got the grades to go to university, there are in-between options. So for example, if they don't quite get the grades, there is a possibility that they can apply to study an access course, which obviously our biggest local provider of access courses is Middlesbrough College. And this is a 1-year qualification that will give them additional UCAS points. And if they go to university on the back of the access course, then that qualification will actually be free for them to undertake. If they decide not to, then there's potentially a loan that they will have to pay back. But if they need it to be able to help them to get into university, this is sometimes a better option than looking at a foundation year, because you're not incurring all of those tuition fees that you would get for a foundation year. Any students who are thinking of doing arts at university, it's often advisable for them to think about doing a foundation diploma at somewhere like the Northern School of Art, because a lot of the art courses at university will be looking for a portfolio that you would present to them in order to be considered for a place. And you may not necessarily have the volume of work from A level. So if they're looking at applying for arts-based courses at university, they might still do that application, but they might put in an application for a foundation diploma as well as a backup in case they don't get in and they need to do some extra study to build up that portfolio. There's also additional training available through vocational routes as well. So they might decide they want to do a T level after leaving us. They might undertake City and Guilds training, which is more vocational again. And if they join things like the uniformed or armed services, they will actually put them through further qualifications too, depending on the route that they're looking to go through in that. So moving on to apprenticeships. I would say even in the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in the amount of interest in apprenticeships, but they are still relatively rare compared to the number of university courses that are available. They are increasing, which is a really good thing, but getting them still more of a challenge than it would be getting a place on a university course. So what is an apprenticeship? Essentially, it's a job that you would get where you spend 80% of the working week doing the job, and then approximately 20% of the time at a place of study. So it might be done through day release. It might be done through block release if you're doing a degree apprenticeship where you go to a university for a week and do some intensive study. So you are getting the best of both worlds, but obviously the student has to be able to balance working full time with studying as well. And if they're doing a degree apprenticeship, it will take longer to achieve that degree. So it may take 4 or 5 years doing it part time rather than the 3 years that you would get if you were studying full time at university. There are a wide range of apprenticeships as well, and there is lots of places that you can go and look for the apprenticeships. The apprenticeships that we would want to be guiding our students towards would really be the higher level and degree level apprenticeships. For school leavers, we would normally talk about doing a level 2 apprenticeship because that's the equivalent to GCSE. Level 3 is the equivalent for A-levels. So really, once they've completed A-levels or applied general qualifications, they should be looking for that next step up into higher level. There are some instances where doing an advanced apprenticeship might be a reasonable route. So for example, if you were looking at wanting to do an NHS apprenticeship, which there are now becoming more of, sometimes it's better to go in on a lower level apprenticeship or a lower level employment start, because once you're in the NHS, you will then have these applications being, these apprenticeships being advertised to you internally. They don't often get advertised externally. As Diane said, obviously, these are extremely competitive, so students have to be quite resilient and determined if they're going to apply for an apprenticeship. And how do you apply for them? Well, you have to be a bit of a detective to find them. These websites are a good starting point, so you can just put in find the government apprenticeship website and it will come up on Google. UCAS is actually developing an application pathway on their website. I think it's in beta stage at the minute, so you can actually use it, but it should go live, I think, in September with the full offer there. So they will be advertising them as well. But you can also just Google apprenticeships or look at companies where they would like to work. If you know you want to work in the science industry or in pharmaceutical industry, then you start by looking at Fujifilm Diosynth, GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, etc. You can look at those directly on their websites to see what they're offering. And students shouldn't limit themselves to apprenticeships that are just available in Tees Valley or the North East. They can apply for any apprenticeship nationally. Yes, they will have to go live away. They might have to go and find their own accommodation. But if it's a good apprenticeship, then it will be worth doing that. The Dyson apprenticeships for engineering, that's quite an interesting one, because if students are successful with that, Dyson do actually have their own mini campus that is a little bit like a university campus, and they will offer accommodation through that as well. But that's an exception rather than the general rule that you would see. That's just the way that they've gone about offering their degree apprenticeships. So they have to be resilient. I think Diane would probably say the volume of applications is necessary for apprenticeships. You might have to apply for 10, 20 to actually get an offer for one. And obviously, if the ones that are more well known, then there will be greater level of competition for them. Having said that, we have had some good success already this year. So our students to date on this site, we've got accounts assistant at Momentum Finance. We've got 2 students that are going to be training as accountants with Clive Owens. One student's achieved a level 4 accountancy training apprenticeship with Cummins in Darlington. We've got a student who's got a solicitor traineeship with Signet Law, and we've also got somebody who's secured a civil engineering degree apprenticeship. And there will be more of those coming. This is still quite early in the apprenticeship application season, and I know students are still going for interviews at this time. So moving on to employment, what we would obviously recommend students doing is obviously putting together a CV. The careers team, again, can give some advice and guidance with that, and direct students to good resources as to how to pull together a CV. And then they can go and sort of either cold call on local businesses if they're wanting to just find a job in the local area, or they may well send them out to companies that they're interested in working for. There are lots of websites that they can sign up for locally for job sites, so things like Indeed. There are also the local authority websites are quite good. I think is it North East Jobs that you can sign up for, and that they will advertise all of the local authority jobs in the area. But again, it's looking at employers that they would be working for and sending out that CV. Obviously, once you've done the application form, if there are application forms for the jobs, make sure that you check it through. I know from somebody who looks at quite a lot of application forms, if you see spelling mistakes or incorrect use of punctuation or grammar, that does not look good on an application form. So please make sure that if your student is filling in application forms, you ask them if you can have a quick check over for them to check the spelling for them and the grammar. Moving on to the gap year. This obviously can be quite a popular option, but what we need to be careful of is that students aren't doing it because they don't know what else to do. For some students, it's an easy thing to say if they want to get us off the bat, oh, I'm just going to take a gap year. But for a proper gap year, really, it should involve quite a bit of planning and preparation to make sure that they get the most out of that time. They're only young once, and I think gap years are a tremendous experience for students either before or after university, which might be a better time for them to do them, but they need to plan it carefully. So again, we have a lot of resources available that students can look at to plan out what they're going to do. So if they're going to travel, they need to think about the itinerary and what's the purpose of the travel for them. If they want to take time out to work before going to university, it could be to gain work experience or volunteering experience. And if they're going to apply to university whilst taking a gap year, they need to check carefully that if they're going to be expected to turn up for interview, that they're not travelling at that time as well. So lots of things to think about with a gap year. Some reasons why it could be a mistake. Obviously, it could be very expensive, particularly if they're expecting you to finance their travels. So we would recommend getting them to get a job first and save up before they start planning those grand tours around Europe and beyond. A drifting problem, a common problem in the gap year. So again, it's having that structure, knowing what they're going to do during that time. And then apprenticeship problems, obviously, it can be difficult to apply for during that time as well. So they need to make sure that they know what they're going to do in that year and what their plan is for afterwards to make the most of it. There's some good options and some good organisations that can support students with gap years as well. So there's obviously lots of volunteering organisations, both locally, nationally and overseas, things like VSO, for example. They might decide to work. If they've got a part-time job now, that might be something that they want to continue on with into their gap year. They might want to go and do some kind of summer camp. So we've had students in the past go to Camp America or do things through the BUNAC scheme or PGL holidays. Or there's the organised gap programmes, which again, they can look at the website for that. So students need to make sure that they've got a plan if they're going to take a gap year, and our careers advisors will ask them that if they suggest that that might be their option. So there's some links on there, as you can see, to different organisations, but again, you can Google and say, what are volunteering opportunities in Tees Valley, in the Northeast, in England, in the UK, however big they want to go. And look at opportunities. But if they're thinking about going overseas, they really need to have a look at some of the formal organisations just to make sure that they're safeguarded when they're doing these things. So as I mentioned before, VSO is a really good one, but also Rally International offer volunteering opportunities. Students usually have to do a bit of fundraising first to be able to take part in their opportunities, but then they will obviously put the package together and look after them once they go out to do that kind of volunteering work. Employment, as we said, there's lots of options with regards to that. You can sign up to lots of different employment websites to get updates on jobs. And obviously creating the CV, as we mentioned before, is really important for that as well. And that's just a bit of information about the summer camp. So if they are thinking about doing that next year, they will need to get the application in early doors if they want to stand a chance of getting the particular ones that they want. But yeah, some really good opportunities. I had two friends at university that did Camp America, and they thought it was fantastic. I think they did it between second and third year at university, and they said it was brilliant experience. So it does come recommended. There's also organised gap year groups as well, so you can have a look at those, but obviously the cost can be quite high if you're looking at using those organisations, but we have had students do them in the past and have had positive experiences with those as well. So that's the final take-home message, I think, for the gap year students. So if you've got a student who's talking about that, then they need to be planning ahead and need to start making that plan now if they think they're going to have a year out between university or work or whatever they want to do. So final words before we go. Students need to be aware of the deadlines for application processes. it is not for us to be chasing students up for the early UCAS deadline, the admissions test deadlines, etc. We will send out reminders, but we do not have a list of students who are saying they're going to do these things. So you must make sure that you check with your student. Do they know if they need to do an admissions test? Do they know if they need to apply by the 15th of October deadline? Do they know if they need work experience? It's really important that they make sure that they've checked everything that they need to do for a successful university application, apprenticeship, or an employment application. The best time to seek careers advice is now. Don't leave it till September. The team have probably got more availability sort of going into the summer term, particularly once the year 13s have left and are doing exams. They need to take that opportunity to get that advice now. And they need to keep an open mind. As Diane said, I think a couple of times in the chat, there is nothing wrong with doing two different possible routes. So doing the university route, doing the apprenticeship route, or doing the university route and looking at employment as well. Better to keep the options open than to narrow it down to one thing at this time and say, I'm definitely just doing that one thing. I'm not looking at anything else. I had students last year who adamant on going to university and then at the very last minute managed to secure really good apprenticeships and decided that that's what they would do instead. So it's just about keeping an open mind, focusing on getting the best grades possible and making sure that they're in college as much as possible to access the support that we have available for them as well. So that's the final thing. I know we've got a parents' careers advice email on there. I think, Dan, you would prefer that people didn't email that address. Am I correct? Because we're not sure where the box goes to.
Yes, that's correct. If possible, if they're probably better off just to use our own email accounts, d.bate@pursglove.ac.uk.
Thank you.
Probably better still to sign up to the careers at PPC Instagram account, which is
Absolutely
on the screen there.
Yeah, please, that's the QR code for it as well. So if you are an Instagrammer, please follow them on Instagram, because Diane and Claire and Beth will put things on there all the time, different opportunities. And at the minute we're trying to encourage the students to follow it. I think they're a bit reluctant. It's obviously not seen as the cool thing to do to follow the careers Instagram. So if parents can follow it, they can at least keep abreast of the different offers that we've got on, and anything that's a new vacancy or a new course that we haven't heard about before. The team are really good at sharing that on there as well, and also on the team that the students are linked into within college as well. So that's the end of the presentation. And I have been recording, so I'm going to stop recording shortly. I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions if possible. I'm sure Diane wouldn't mind staying on for a short time as well. And then anybody needs to access the recording afterwards, it will appear in the chat a short time later. So if anybody came in halfway through and they feel like they've missed something, they can pick it up from the chat. I think, is it available for about a week, Diane? Am I right in saying that, do you think?
Yeah, that's about right, yeah.
Yeah, I think